Captain John Hayes stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Liberty, staring at the communication screen with disbelief. The message had arrived just an hour ago, and he had read it 5 times already. Each time, the words remained the same, but they still seemed impossible. The Galactic Council wanted to meet with him. Not just any meeting, but a formal session on their capital world of Nexus Prime. In 300 years of human space travel, no human had ever been invited to such an event. The Council barely acknowledged that humans existed, let alone considered them worthy of attention. "Captain, you look like you've seen a ghost," Lieutenant Kate Brooks said as she approached his command chair. Kate was his tactical officer, a sharp woman who rarely missed details that others overlooked. She had been studying the message data for the past hour, and her expression showed the same confusion John felt.
"Read this again, Kate," John said,
forwarding the message to her personal display. "Tell me if you see what I see." Kate's eyes moved quickly across the text. Her brow furrowed as she reached the end. This part about weapons restrictions doesn't make sense. Every species that enters the council chambers carries ceremonial weapons or protection gear. The Zephyrians have their plasma staffs, the Korthok wear battle armor, and those crystal beings from the Vex system generate energy shields around themselves. But humans, John said slowly, are explicitly forbidden from bringing any weapons, armor, or defensive equipment of any kind. "It's either an insult or a trap," Kate said. "Maybe both." Dr. Paul Grant entered the bridge at that moment, carrying a data tablet filled with research notes. Paul was their xenobiologist, a quiet man who spent most of his time studying alien life forms and cultures. He rarely spoke unless he had something important to say, so John paid attention when Paul cleared his throat. "Captain, I've been analyzing the communication patterns and linguistic markers in that council message," Paul said. "The phrasing suggests this invitation comes from a position of uncertainty rather than authority. They're not commanding us to appear, they're asking, almost pleading." John turned his chair to face Paul fully. "What do you mean?" "The Council operates on strict protocols that have been in place for thousands of years. Every interaction follows established patterns based on species hierarchy and military strength. This message breaks several of those patterns. The formal language is there, but underneath it, there's something else. Fear, maybe, or desperate curiosity." Kate checked her tactical display. "We've been monitoring Council communications for weeks. There's been unusual activity in their military channels. Ships moving, defense grids activating, emergency meetings between species leaders. Something has them spooked. Any idea what?" Don asked. "The New Dakota incident," Paul said quietly. 3 months ago, human colonists on the frontier world of New Dakota had faced an invasion by the Grimlock Horde. The Grimlocks were brutal raiders who had been terrorizing the outer systems for decades. They traveled in massive fleets, overwhelming their targets with sheer numbers and savage violence. No single colony had ever successfully defended against a major Grimlock assault, but New Dakota had not only survived, they had driven the invaders away completely. The colonists had used improvised weapons, clever tactics, and pure determination to defeat an enemy that had crushed much better armed opponents. The victory had shocked the entire galaxy. "The Council has been trying to understand how we did it," Paul continued. "They've sent investigation teams, hired mercenaries to gather intelligence, even attempted to recruit some of our colonists. Every species in the galaxy wants to know our secret." "What secret?" Kate asked. "We just fought back with whatever we had." "That's exactly the point," Paul said. "Every other species in the galaxy fights with advanced weapons and established military doctrine. When they face a superior force, they either win through superior technology or they lose. Humans do something different. We adapt. We improvise. We turn everyday objects into weapons and find ways to win that nobody else thinks." "Oh." John stood up and walked to the main view screen, which showed the stars ahead of them. Liberty was still 3 days away from Nexus Prime, but he could feel the weight of what awaited them there. The Council represented 47 different alien civilizations, each more advanced than humanity in some way. They had technologies that humans could barely understand, weapons that could destroy entire planets, and military forces that had been fighting wars for millennia. Paul, you said they're afraid? What exactly are they afraid of? Us, Paul said simply. They're afraid of us. The bridge fell silent for a moment. The idea seemed ridiculous. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community with simple technology and small fleets. How could the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy fear them? Think about it from their perspective, Paul explained. They've built their entire society on the idea that military might and advanced technology determine strength. Suddenly, a species with primitive weapons and no formal military training defeats one of the most feared fighting forces in the galaxy. It doesn't fit their understanding of how the universe works. Kate brought up a tactical analysis on the main screen. I've been studying the new Dakota battle records. The colonists didn't have a single military-grade weapon. They used mining explosives, farming equipment, construction tools, and household items. They turned their entire settlement into a fortress, using materials that any other species would consider useless for warfare. And they won, John said. Not just won, Kate corrected. They won so decisively that the Grimlocks retreated and haven't been seen in that sector since. The entire horde avoided human space after that. A new communication alert sounded on the bridge. Lieutenant Commander Ron Bell, John's second-in-command, checked the incoming message. Captain, we're receiving updated instructions from the Council. They're providing us with detailed security protocols for our arrival. Let me guess, John said. More restrictions on what we can bring. Actually, yes, Ron said, reading from his display. No weapons, no armor, no defensive systems, no communication devices, no recording equipment, and no medical supplies beyond basic first aid. We're also restricted to a single representative plus one aide. They really don't want us to have any advantages, Kate observed. Or any way to document what happens, Paul added. John returned to his command chair and activated the ship's communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We'll be arriving at Nexus Prime in 3 days for a diplomatic meeting with the Galactic Council. This is a historic opportunity for humanity, and we will conduct ourselves with honor and professionalism. Paused, considering his next words carefully. I want everyone to understand that we're walking into an unknown situation. The Council has requested that we arrive unarmed and with minimal support. This goes against every tactical principle we've learned, but we're going to honor their request. We're explorers and diplomats first, not soldiers. After closing the communication channel, John turned to his senior staff. Kate, I want you to prepare a complete tactical analysis of Nexus Prime's defenses and Council security procedures. Don't plan an attack, but I want to understand what we're walking into. Captain, Paul, keep researching Council politics and recent military activities. I need to understand who wants this meeting and who might be opposed to it. Already on it, sir. Ron, you'll be coming with me to the Council session. Start preparing for every possible scenario. This could be a historic diplomatic breakthrough or a very elaborate trap. As his officers returned to their duties, John remained in his command chair, staring at the stars ahead. In 3 days, he would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, completely defenseless and representing the entire human race. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than the ship around him. But underneath the anxiety, John felt something else: excitement. For the first time in human history, the galaxy was taking notice of them. Whether that attention would prove beneficial or dangerous remained to be seen. But it meant that humanity was no longer just another insignificant species struggling to survive on the edges of civilization. They were about to discover just how significant they really were. The Liberty emerged from hyperspace 3 kilometers above Nexus Prime, and John Hayes felt his breath catch in his throat. The planet below was unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive crystalline structures reached up from the surface like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 different suns. The largest structure, the Council building, stood at the center of it all like a spear thrust into the sky. Captain, we're being hailed by Nexus Prime Traffic Control, reported Lieutenant Commander Ron Bell from the communication station. They're directing us to landing Platform 7. Acknowledged, John replied, but his attention remained fixed on the view screen. Ships from dozens of different species moved through the space around the planet. He could see the sleek silver vessels of the Zephyrians, the massive blocky transports of the Korthok, and the strange geometric shapes that served as Vex crystal ships. Each design reflected the nature of its creators, from elegant curves to brutal angles. "Those are some serious weapons," Lieutenant Kate Brooks observed from her tactical station. "Every ship down there is armed like a battlecruiser. Even the ones that look like civilian transports have enough firepower to level a city." Dr. Paul Grant stood beside John's chair, studying the alien vessels through the main viewer. "It makes sense from their perspective. Council space, showing military strength, is a sign of respect. The more dangerous you appear, the more seriously other species take you. And we're going down there completely defenseless," John said quietly. "Not defenseless," Paul corrected. "Unarmed. There's a difference." 20 minutes later, John and Ron stood on the transport platform, watching as a council shuttle approached their landing pad. The vehicle was unlike anything from human design, appearing to be grown rather than built. Its surface rippled like living metal, and it moved through the air without any visible propulsion system. The shuttle's door opened with a sound like wind chimes, and a figure emerged that made both humans step back involuntarily. The being stood, nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted between different shades of blue. Its head was elongated, with large black eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. This was a Nexari, one of the oldest species in the council. "Humans John Hayes and Ron Bell," the alien said, its voice coming from a translation device around its neck. "I am Guide Morden. I will escort you to the council chamber." "Thank you," John replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're honored to be here." The Nexari made a sound that might have been laughter. "Honor is earned through strength. Human, you have yet to demonstrate either." The shuttle ride to the council building took 15 minutes, during which Morden explained the basic protocols. "You will enter the chamber last, after all other species have presented themselves. You will stand in the center of the floor, where all can observe you. You will speak only when directly addressed by the council speaker." "What about the weapons displays we've heard about?" Ron asked. "Each species demonstrates their military capabilities as a sign of respect, and to establish their position in the hierarchy," Morden explained. "The Soros will show their plasma cannons. The Hive will display their bioelectric weapons. The Korthok will demonstrate their armor systems. You will stand empty-handed, because we're not allowed to bring weapons," John said. "Because you are not worthy of weapons," Morden replied bluntly. The shuttle landed on a platform near the top of the council spire. As they disembarked, John could see the city spreading out below them. Nexus Prime was home to representatives from every major species in the galaxy, and the architecture reflected that diversity. Towering spires stood next to low, sprawling complexes. Some buildings seemed to be made of light itself, while others appeared to be carved from single massive stones. "This way," Morden said, leading them through a corridor that curved gently upward. The walls were transparent, offering views of the city and the other species moving through the building. John saw a group of insectoid creatures that had to be the Hive, their chitinous bodies gleaming under the artificial lights. A pack of wolf-like beings prowled past, their eyes glowing with predatory intelligence. "So many different species," Ron whispered. 47 civilizations, Morden confirmed. "All more advanced than yours, all more dangerous." They reached a massive circular chamber at the heart of the building. The room was designed like an amphitheater, with tiered seating rising up from a central floor. Representatives from different species occupied sections based on their military rankings and technological achievements. At the highest level sat the most powerful civilizations, while newer or weaker species were relegated to the lower tiers. "The human seating area," Morden said, gesturing to a small section near the bottom of the chamber. "Appropriate for your current status?" John looked around the chamber and felt a chill run down his spine. This was not a diplomatic meeting. This was a gathering of predators, each one measuring the others for weakness. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained aggression. A deep, resonant sound filled the chamber, and all conversation stopped. At the center of the highest tier, a figure rose from what John had thought was an empty chair. The being was ancient beyond measure, its skin translucent, and its eyes holding the weight of millennia. This was Council Speaker Zorhan, representative of the first civilization. We gather in the name of order and strength. Zorhan's voice echoed through the chamber without any visible amplification. Let each species show their worth. What followed was unlike anything John had ever witnessed. The Soros delegation, led by Prime Minister Kreshtar, activated weapons that crackled with barely contained energy. Plasma bolts shot across the chamber, striking targets with precision that made John's hands sweat. The reptilian beings moved with deadly grace, their scaled skin gleaming like armor. The Hive Queen stepped forward next, her insectoid form towering over her smaller drones. Bioelectric whips extended from her arms, crackling with power that could stop a heart. The whips moved like living things, striking multiple targets simultaneously. While her compound eyes tracked every movement in the chamber, the Korthok demonstration was pure brutality. Their armor systems activated with mechanical precision, turning the already large beings into walking tanks. Weapons emerged from hidden compartments, and their defensive shields flared to life. They looked like they could walk through a building and emerge unharmed on the other side. Each species took their turn, showing off technologies that humanity could barely comprehend. The Vex created energy constructs that shifted and changed, shape according to their will. The Nebulans, who existed as clouds of intelligent gas, manifested solid forms that could phase through matter. The Zephyrians demonstrated speed that made them almost invisible to the naked eye. Impressive, Zorhan said when the last demonstration ended. Now we come to the humans. The chamber fell silent. John felt every eye in the room focus on him as he walked down to the center of the floor. The space seemed enormous, designed to make whoever stood there feel small and vulnerable. He could hear his own heartbeat in the silence. Humans, Zorhan continued, you have been granted a unique privilege. You, alone among all species, are permitted to enter this chamber without weapons, without armor, without any means of defense. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Some species clicked or hissed in what might have been laughter. Others remained silent, but John could feel their attention like a physical weight. This privilege, Zorhan said, is granted because our preliminary studies suggest you possess something unprecedented in galactic history. The ability to transform any environment, any collection of objects, into weapons of war. The capacity to fight and win without traditional armaments. The chamber erupted. Species representatives rose from their seats, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound. John caught fragments of translation. Impossible. Primitive. Species. Deception. Prime Minister Kreshtar stood, his reptilian form radiating authority. This is absurd. These humans are barely evolved primates. They have no advanced technology, no sophisticated weapons, no military tradition worth mentioning. How can they possibly possess abilities that surpass our own? An excellent question, Zorhan replied. One that deserves a demonstration. Ancient being's eyes fixed on John. Captain Hayes, you stand accused of representing a species that claims abilities beyond your apparent means. Prime Minister Kreshtar challenges this claim. Do you accept? John felt the weight of human history on his shoulders. Every person who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there was depending on his answer. I accept. Then let us see, Zorhan said, what humans can do when they have nothing but themselves to rely on. The floor beneath John's feet began to move. What he had thought was solid ground split apart, revealing a mechanical lift that carried him downward. The council chamber disappeared above him as he descended into what could only be described as an arena. The walls were smooth metal, the ceiling high enough to accommodate large flying creatures, and the floor covered with objects that looked completely ordinary. John found himself standing in the center of a circular room, about 50 meters across. Around the edges, he could see viewing windows where the council members had gathered to watch. their alien faces pressed against the transparent barriers, some showing curiosity, others displaying what might have been amusement or contempt. "Captain Hayes," came Speaker Zorhan's voice through hidden speakers, "you will face a series of challenges designed to test your species' claimed abilities. You may use anything you find in the arena, but you may not leave the designated area. The first challenge begins in 60 seconds. John looked around quickly, taking inventory of what surrounded him. There was furniture that looked like it came from a dozen different worlds, tables and chairs of various sizes and materials, kitchen equipment including what appeared to be food preparation devices and cleaning supplies. Maintenance tools hung on wall racks. Building materials were stacked in corners. It looked like someone had emptied a storage warehouse into the arena. A mechanical whirring sound filled the air, and panels in the walls slid open. 3 objects emerged that made John's heart rate spike. They were clearly combat drones, each about the size of a large dog but floating 2 meters off the ground. Energy weapons were mounted on their fronts, and their movements were precise and coordinated. The first drone fired immediately. John dove behind a metal table as an energy blast scorched the floor where he had been standing. His mind raced, analyzing the situation with the methodical thinking that had kept him alive during his years in space exploration. The drones were fast, but not incredibly so. Their weapons had a brief recharge time between shots. They seemed to be programmed to work together, positioning themselves to eliminate hiding spots. John needed to even the odds quickly. He grabbed the metal table and flipped it on its side, using it as a shield while he examined the other objects nearby. A set of chairs caught his attention. They were made of a lightweight but strong material, with metal legs that could be removed. John quickly twisted one leg free, creating a projectile about 1 meter long. The drones had spread out, trying to surround his position. John waited until one moved close to investigate his hiding spot, then stood up quickly and hurled the chair leg like a spear. His aim was perfect. Improvised weapon struck the drone's sensor array, sending it spinning out of control before it crashed to the floor. The remaining 2 drones adjusted their tactics immediately, staying further back and firing in coordinated bursts. John realized he needed to think differently. Instead of just hiding and throwing things, he needed to control the battlefield itself. He noticed that the arena's lighting system consisted of panels in the ceiling that could be adjusted. More importantly, he saw that some of the building materials included reflective metal sheets. John grabbed several sheets and began positioning them around the arena, creating a maze of angled surfaces. When the drones fired their next volley, something interesting happened. The energy beams bounced off the metal sheets, scattering in different directions. John had turned their own weapons into a hazard for them. One drone actually damaged itself when its own reflected shot struck its side, but John was not finished. He had noticed that the kitchen area included what looked like a magnetic containment unit for food storage. With some quick rewiring using tools from the maintenance section, he turned it into an electromagnetic pulse device. It was crude and would only work once, but it might be enough. The remaining drones had learned to avoid their own reflected shots, but they had not expected John to come at them directly. He charged forward, carrying his improvised device, and activated it just as one drone moved in to finish him. The electromagnetic pulse fried the drone's systems completely, leaving only one opponent. The final drone had learned from watching its companions fail. It stayed high in the air, out of reach of thrown objects, and fired carefully aimed shots. John found himself pinned behind cover with limited options. That was when he noticed the arena's artificial gravity system. The floor panels were not just decorative, they were part of a network that controlled gravitational fields throughout the room. If he could access the control system, he might be able to turn gravity itself into a weapon. John began moving between cover points, not randomly, but in a specific pattern. He was positioning the building materials he had been using to create a crude but functional electromagnetic induction system. When he connected the final component using wire from the kitchen appliances, the gravity in a section of the arena reversed the drone, which had been programmed to fight in normal gravity, suddenly found itself being pulled toward the ceiling. Its navigation systems could not compensate quickly enough. John had positioned his trap perfectly. The drone smashed into the ceiling with enough force to destroy it completely. Silence filled the arena. John stood among the wreckage of his improvised weapons and the destroyed drones, breathing heavily but unharmed. Above him, he could see the alien faces pressed against the viewing windows. Their expressions had changed. Where there had been amusement or contempt, now there was something else. Surprise, concern, maybe even fear. Impressive, came Zorhan's voice, but that was merely the beginning. The second challenge will test your abilities against a more sophisticated opponent. The arena floor shifted again, clearing away the debris and replacing it with a new selection of objects. This time, John saw more complex items. Electronic devices, chemical supplies, manufacturing equipment, and what looked like components from various alien technologies. The walls opened again, and something much larger emerged. It was clearly a security robot designed for suppressing riots or handling dangerous criminals. It stood 3 meters tall, with multiple arms ending in different tools and weapons. Its armor looked thick enough to stop anything John could throw at it, but John was no longer thinking like someone who throws things at problems. He had begun to see the arena differently. Every object was a potential component. Every system was something that could be modified or repurposed. The robot was not an opponent to be destroyed, but a puzzle to be solved. He started with the electronic devices, quickly identifying power sources and control systems. The chemical supplies included cleaning agents that could be combined in interesting ways. The manufacturing equipment gave him precision tools for modification work. John's hands moved with practiced efficiency, connecting components and creating something that had never existed before. It was not a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a solution to the specific problem of the security robot. When the robot charged at him, expecting to face someone armed with primitive clubs or throwing objects, it instead encountered something unprecedented. John had created a device that interfered with the robot's control systems, while simultaneously using its own power source against it.
Ow.
The massive machine stopped in the middle of its attack, its systems overloaded by feedback. From its own weapons, the robot toppled over, not destroyed but completely disabled. John stood beside it, holding a device cobbled together from kitchen appliances, electronic components, and cleaning supplies.
Ow.
Something that no engineer from any species had ever conceived of, because no one else thought the way humans did. Above him, the council chamber was completely silent. John looked up at the viewing windows and saw something in the alien faces that he had never expected to see. It was not anger or contempt or even surprise. It was respect. And underneath that, something that might have been the beginning of fear. They were starting to understand what they were dealing with. The final challenge, Zorhan announced, his ancient voice carrying a note of uncertainty, will determine whether these abilities are truly as dangerous as they appear. The arena floor began to change once more, but this time something different happened. Instead of new equipment appearing, the walls themselves started to move. Sections slid away to reveal a much larger space, and John realized he was no longer in a simple testing chamber. He now stood in what could only be described as a hunting ground. The new environment was designed to look like a natural wilderness, complete with rocky outcroppings, dense vegetation, and uneven terrain. But John could see that it was all artificial, created by advanced technology to simulate the most dangerous conditions possible. Hidden within this fake wilderness, something was waiting for him. "Captain Hayes!" Speaker Zorhan's voice echoed. From speakers concealed throughout the area, "Your final test will be against a creature that has never been defeated in single combat. The Korthok Apex Hunter, brought from the death world of Korash Prime. It has killed over 300 opponents in the arena, including trained warriors from the most militaristic species in the galaxy." John felt a chill run down his spine. Through the viewing windows above, he could see the council members leaning forward with anticipation. Prime Minister Krestar's reptilian face showed what might have been satisfaction. Soro's leader clearly expected this to be where the human finally failed. A roar echoed through the arena that made John's bones vibrate. From the far end of the artificial wilderness, something emerged that belonged in nightmares. The apex hunter stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder, with 6 legs ending in claws that could tear through steel. Its hide was covered in natural armor plates, and its head held teeth designed for cutting through anything that lived. The creature moved with a predator's grace, despite its massive size. But what made John's heart race was not the creature's size or weapons. It was the intelligence he could see in its eyes. This was not a mindless beast. It was a thinking predator that had learned how to kill efficiently through centuries of combat experience. The creature began to circle him, staying just out of range while studying his movements. John realized it was learning about him, looking for weaknesses and patterns. Every warrior it had faced before had carried weapons and armor, was trying to understand what kind of threat an unarmed human might represent. John forced himself to remain calm and think clearly. Panic would get him killed faster than the creature's claws. He needed to understand his environment and find advantages that others had missed. The artificial wilderness was filled with rocks, plants, and what looked like a small stream running through the center, as the apex hunter continued its careful stalking. But instead of trying to stay away from the creature, he started gathering specific items. A handful of the local plant life, some rocks of particular sizes and shapes, and mud from beside the stream. To the watching council members, it probably looked like desperate scrambling. The creature finally decided to attack. It charged with frightening speed, its claws tearing up the ground as it closed the distance. John had perhaps 3 seconds to execute a plan he had been forming while gathering his materials. He threw the mud not at the creature, but at a specific angle that would make it splatter across the beast's eyes. The apex hunter had faced this tactic before and had learned to close its eyes during charges, but John had not been trying to blind it permanently. He only needed a moment of confusion. In that moment, John did something no other opponent had ever tried. Instead of running away from the charging predator, he ran toward it, but at an angle that took him under its massive body. The creature's own momentum carried it past him as he rolled between its legs, but John was not trying to escape. He was positioning himself for the next part of his plan. As the creature turned to find him, John used the rocks he had gathered, not as projectiles, but as tools to create a fulcrum point. Combined with a sturdy branch he had selected, he had created a lever system. The apex hunter charged again, this time more carefully. It had learned that the human was trickier than expected, but it had not learned to expect what happened next. John waited until the last possible moment, then used his improvised lever to redirect a large boulder. The creature tried to dodge, but John had calculated the angles perfectly. The boulder did not hit the apex hunter directly. Instead, it struck the ground just in front of the creature's feet. The impact created exactly what John had hoped for. A shower of sharp rock fragments flew upward, and the creature instinctively closed its eyes and raised its head to protect itself. In that moment of blindness, John made his move. He had saved the plant material for last. During his quick survey of the area, he had identified several species that produced natural toxins. Not enough to kill something as large as the apex hunter, but enough to cause temporary paralysis if applied correctly. John leaped onto the creature's back, using its own raised head as a stepping stone. The plant toxins, mixed with mud to make them stick, went directly into the sensitive areas around the creature's eyes and nostrils. The effect was immediate. The apex hunter began to stagger, its powerful muscles no longer responding properly to its commands. It was not dying, but it could not coordinate its movements well enough to fight effectively. Within minutes, the massive predator had collapsed onto its side. Breathing heavily, but unable to rise, John stood beside the fallen creature, breathing just as heavily. He had not killed it. He had not even seriously injured it. He had simply found a way to make it unable to continue fighting. Toxins would wear off in a few hours and the creature would be fine. The arena fell completely silent. Above in the viewing chambers, John could see that every council member was staring down at him with expressions he could not read. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, Speaker Zorhan's voice filled the arena. "Bring him up." The lift platform rose, carrying John back to the council chamber. As he emerged from the arena floor, he could feel the weight of 47 different civilizations studying him. But something had changed in their attention. Where before there had been dismissal or curiosity, now there was something much more serious. Council member Zorhan announced, "We have witnessed something unprecedented. Dr. Veltar, please present your analysis." A new figure stepped forward, unlike anything John had seen before. Dr. Veltar appeared to be made of living crystal, her form shifting and changing as she moved. When she spoke, her voice had the quality of wind chimes. "Honored Council, my research team has been studying human development for the past several cycles. What we have observed challenges our fundamental understanding of evolutionary development and military capability." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing images and data that John recognized as information about Earth and human history. Humans evolved on what can only be classified as a death world. Their planet experienced frequent climate changes, natural disasters, and competition from numerous apex predators. Most species that develop intelligence do so by avoiding such challenges. Humans developed intelligence specifically to overcome them. The displays showed scenes of human history. Hunters tracking mammoth across ice sheets, engineers building bridges over raging rivers, farmers growing crops in hostile environments. This created a unique combination of traits, Dr. Veltar continued. Exceptional pattern recognition, rapid adaptation to new environments, emotional stability under extreme stress, and most importantly, the ability to see weapons and tools and objects that other species consider useless. Prime Minister Kreshtar stood up, his scaled form radiating anger. "This is speculation. One demonstration proves nothing about an entire species." "Actually," Dr. Veltar replied, "it proves everything. Captain Hayes just defeated our most successful arena fighter using nothing but rocks, plants, and mud. Did not win through superior strength or advanced technology. He won by thinking in ways that no other species considers possible." Another council member, a being that looked like a collection of geometric shapes, spoke up. "If humans can do this with primitive materials, what could they do with access to advanced technology?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. John realized that the demonstration had not just been about proving human capabilities. It had been about making the council understand what those capabilities meant for the future of galactic civilization. "That," said Speaker Zorhan, "is exactly what we must now decide." The council chamber remained silent for several long minutes after Dr. Veltar finished her presentation. John could see the alien representatives processing what they had witnessed and learned. Some looked thoughtful, others appeared concerned, and a few seemed genuinely frightened by the implications. Prime Minister Kreshtar was the first to break the silence. The large reptilian being stood up, his scaled hands gripping the edge of his platform. "This changes nothing," he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. "So humans can improvise weapons from common objects. This makes them dangerous, yes, but it also makes them unpredictable. Unpredictable species threaten the stability we have maintained for thousands of years." Several other council members made sounds of agreement. John noticed they were mostly from the militaristic species, the ones whose power came from their ability to wage war more effectively than their neighbors. They had built their civilizations on the idea that superior weapons and tactics determined success. "Prime Minister Kreshtar raises an important point," said a delegate from the hive, her insectoid features clicking with agitation. "Our social structures depend on understanding the capabilities of other species. If humans can exceed expected performance parameters unpredictably, how can we maintain diplomatic relationships with them?" But not all the council members seemed to share this concern. A representative from the Traders Guild, a peaceful species that focused on commerce rather than warfare, stood up. "Perhaps we are looking at this incorrectly. If humans can find solutions where others see only problems, they could be valuable partners rather than threats." "Partners," Kreshtar's laugh was a harsh sound. "These creatures just demonstrated that they can defeat our most advanced combat systems, using kitchen supplies and garden materials. What happens when they decide our technology would serve their purposes better than it serves ours?" Speaker Zorhan raised one ancient hand, and the chamber fell quiet again. The debate reveals the heart of our dilemma, he said. We have operated for millennia on the principle that military strength determines political power. Humans have introduced a variable we did not anticipate. John realized this was his moment to speak. He had been standing silently, listening to the debate about his species' future, but now he needed to represent humanity's interests. May I address the council? You may speak, Captain Hayes, Zorhan replied. John looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as possible. Honored council members, I understand your concerns. What you have seen today must seem threatening to the order you have maintained. But I want you to consider something else about humans that your tests did not measure. He paused, gathering his thoughts. He focused on our ability to fight and survive. But what makes humans truly unique is not that we can turn anything into a weapon. It is that we can also choose not to. The chamber stirred with interest. This was clearly not what they had expected him to say. In that arena, I could have killed the apex hunter, John continued. The toxins I used could have been made lethal with just small modifications. But I chose to disable rather than destroy. When humans fought the Grimlock invasion at New Dakota, we drove them away rather than pursuing them to wipe out their fleet. We win our battles, but we do not seek to eliminate our enemies completely. Dr. Velter's crystalline form chimed softly. This is consistent with our observations. Humans show unusual restraint for a species with such combat effectiveness. Restraint born from wisdom, John said. We learned long ago that today's enemy might become tomorrow's ally. We fight when we must, but we prefer to solve problems through cooperation and innovation. A new voice joined the conversation. It came from one of the highest platforms in the chamber, from a representative John. Had not noticed before, the being was ancient, even older than Speaker Zorhan, and when it spoke, the entire council listened with obvious respect. I am Archive Keeper Thalon, of the First Civilization, the being said. And people have been watching human development. Since your species first looked up at the stars, we have seen many promising civilizations rise and fall. Most destroy themselves through war or resource depletion. Others stagnate and fade into irrelevance. John felt the weight of history in the ancient being's words. Humans are different, Thalon continued. You continue to grow and adapt. You face challenges by finding new solutions rather than repeating old patterns. This makes you the most dangerous species we have encountered, but also the most valuable. Valuable how? Asked the trader representative. Consider the problems. Facing our galaxy, Thalon replied, the Outer Rim territories are becoming uninhabitable due to stellar radiation increases. The trade routes through the Magellan sector have been unusable for centuries because of gravitational anomalies. The Grimlock horde continues to threaten peaceful worlds despite our best military efforts. John began to understand where this was leading. These are problems that require new thinking, Thalon said. Military force alone has not solved them. Advanced technology has not solved them. Perhaps human innovation can succeed where our traditional approaches have failed. Prime Minister Kreshtar stood up again, his anger obvious. You propose to give these primitives access to our most advanced systems and territories. The risk is enormous. The risk of not doing so may be greater, Thalon replied calmly. Our civilizations have reached a point of stability that may actually be stagnation. We fight the same battles, solve the same problems in the same ways, and make the same mistakes repeatedly. Humans offer something we have lost, the ability to see new possibilities. Speaker Zorhan called for formal debate, and for the next 2 hours, John listened as the representatives of 47 civilizations argued about humanity's future. The discussion revealed deep divisions within the galactic community. Didactic, militaristic species wanted humans contained or controlled. The peaceful civilizations saw opportunities for beneficial partnerships. The ancient species spoke of humanity's potential to solve long-standing problems. Finally, Zorhan called for a vote. The question was simple. Should humans be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with the same rights and responsibilities as other species? The voting process was unlike anything from human democratic traditions. Each species cast their vote by activating a crystal that changed color based on their decision. Blue for acceptance, red for rejection, white for abstention. John watched as the crystals around the chamber began to glow. Many of the militaristic species chose red as expected, but more chose blue than John had dared to hope. The peaceful trading civilizations voted for acceptance. Several of the ancient species added their blue votes. Even some of the warrior cultures decided that partnership was preferable to potential conflict. When the final vote was counted, the result was 31 in favor, 13 opposed, and 3 abstentions. Humanity had been accepted into the galactic community, but Speaker Zorhan was not finished. The Council has reached a decision regarding human membership. However, there is one additional matter to address: the question of why humans alone are permitted to enter council chambers unarmed. John had almost forgotten about that original mystery. His privilege, Zorhan explained, will become permanent. Humans will be the only species allowed to attend council sessions without weapons or defensive equipment. This is not because we consider you weak or untrustworthy. It is because you have proven something unprecedented. The ancient speaker's eyes fixed on John. You've demonstrated that you are simultaneously completely vulnerable and completely dangerous. You can be trusted with this vulnerability because you have shown wisdom in the use of your capabilities. Other species require weapons because they depend on them. Humans require no weapons because you can make weapons from anything, including the challenge itself. 6 months later, John stood in the same council chamber, but now he wore the formal robes of a council member. As the first human ambassador to the galactic community, he had helped establish the Human Integration Protocol. Young humans now served throughout council space as advisors, engineers, and problem solvers. The Outer Rim radiation problem had been solved by a human engineer, who found a way to use the radiation itself to power protective shields. The Magellan sector trade routes were reopened after a human physicist discovered how to navigate the gravitational anomalies safely. Even the Grimlock horde had been dealt with through negotiation rather than warfare, after human diplomats found ways to address the underlying causes of their aggression. John looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. Some still watched humans with caution, but most had come to see them as valuable allies. The galaxy was changing, becoming more cooperative and innovative. The privilege of entering the council unarmed had become humanity's greatest symbol. It represented not weakness or trust, but the recognition that true strength came from the mind's ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. In a universe full of species that had perfected the art of war, humans had perfected something far more powerful: the art of turning any challenge into an opportunity for growth.